To the Pandemic Baseball Book Club. I'm Andrew Forbes, author of The Only Way is the Steady Way. We're here today to discuss 100 Miles of Baseball, 50 Games, One Summer. And with me are the book's authors, Heidi L.M. Jacobs and Dale Jacobs. Together, they've written an account of an incredible summer, which allowed them to examine their relationship to the game, and in so doing, to provide readers with a beautiful, heartfelt, and a very carefully considered series of meditations on baseball's myriad pleasures and meanings. I'm eager to talk about the book with them, but first we'll do some introductions. Heidi's novel, Molly of the Mall, literary lass and purveyor of fine footwear, won the Stephen Leacock Medal for Humor in 2020. She is a librarian at the University of Windsor and one of the researchers behind the award-winning project, Breaking the Color Barrier, Wilfred Boomer Harding and the Chatham Colored All-Stars. She is currently writing a book about the 1934 Chatham Colored All-Stars, the first Black team to win the Ontario Baseball Amateur Association Championship. That book is forthcoming with Biblioasis in the spring of 2022. Originally from Edmonton, Alberta, she now lives in Windsor, Ontario. Dale Jacobs is the author of Graphic Encounters, Comics and the Sponsorship of Multimodal Literacy. He's the editor of Sunday with the Tigers, 11 Ways to Watch a Game, and the Miles Horton Reader. He's co-editor of A Way to Move, Rhetorics of Emotion and Composition Studies. His academic creative nonfiction book, The 1976 Project on Comics and Grief, is forthcoming from Wilfrid Laurier University Press. He is the editor of the Windsor Review and teaches in the English department at the University of Windsor. Dale and Heidi join me today from Windsor, Ontario. Hello to you both.
Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Andrew.
So it is a wonderful book. I should hold it up so people get familiar with the cover. A wonderful book,
Thanks.
A wonderful summer. In some ways, it read like an excuse to spend a summer dedicated to baseball. You had both long had Tigers tickets together, seasons tickets, which you opted not to renew for a few different reasons in 2017. And then for the summer of 2018, you decide you're going to do this. You're going to travel with a 100-mile radius and see 50 games in 100 days, which is ambitious, as I think you get into in the book. I've certainly dreamed of doing something like that, and I'm sure a lot of people listening or watching have also, but I never had the brilliant idea of tying it to a book contract, which I think probably had the dual effect of holding your feet to the fire and kind of legitimizing the project. How quickly did the whole thing come together from the germ of the idea to maybe that first game that you attended?
Well, it came together pretty quickly. I guess probably in the very early part of 2018, we started kicking around this idea. We kind of did need that project, that way to hold our feet to the fire, as you say. So we came up with this idea of 100 miles, and it's a riff on the 100-mile diet. And so we talked about it and we came up with this idea, and then we approached Biblioasis, Sharon Hanna, who eventually became our editor, and she ran it by Dan Wells, the publisher, and sort of went back and forth for maybe 2 weeks. And then we had a meeting with them on what was supposed to be Tigers opening day, but was rained out. So we were able to meet with Dan. He actually had tickets for opening day, but he had a free afternoon because of the rain out. So we meet him that day, and they said, yeah, we want to do it. We'll do a contract. And we went to our first game the next day at Wayne State in Detroit.
That's amazing. Maybe for people tuning in who aren't familiar with Dan Wells and Biblioasis, maybe you can give them a brief rundown of where Biblioasis stands kind of in the Windsor community. And I know that Dan is a big baseball fan, so it's not surprising that he'd have tickets to that game.
Yeah, I mean, Biblioasis is, they're certainly a big part of the Windsor literary community, but they're a press that's, they're now one of the major independent presses in Canada, or I would even say North America. They get written up in the New York Times and the LA Times, and they just had a book win the Governor General's Award for translation yesterday. So we were pretty stoked, feeling pretty privileged to have the book come out with Biblioasis and the really great editorial team and promotion team that they have over there.
In the project, you ended up going to games at so many different levels. I didn't count. You may know off the top of your head, sort of between, like, it ranged from high school sort of all the way up to the majors, right?
Mhm.
The Inter-County League makes an appearance, which is exciting because that's such a quintessentially Ontario thing. Neither one of you were new to baseball, and you were anything but naive. You both have, histories with the game. You know a lot about it. But what did you discover in the course of this project that may have surprised you, or even just something that you really hadn't been familiar with, some aspect of the game that you really didn't had never encountered before?
Well, most of my baseball experience almost exclusively was MLB. That sort of, I think when I met Dale, we started going to Major League Baseball when we met in Edmonton, and then I remember we drove to look at grad schools. I think we went specifically so that we could go to a Minneapolis game, which I now realize this is your how you charted that route, Dale. It took me many years to figure that out, but I think on it. So we would, anywhere we would try to go to an MLB game. So I really sort of thought MLB was baseball. And so I think, if anything, what surprised me about this project was how utterly brilliant and exciting and riveting non-MLB games could be. And in fact, I think one of the games that we're reluctant to be not interested in a game, because that was part of the project, was not just to go to the games, but to become engaged in them. And I think the Cleveland game, was that the one we were at, Dale, that was one that we both really sort of struggled to pay attention, and we both sort of thought, oh, it's that distance, it's the sort of disconnection from the field, which I don't think I would have really picked up on had we not been to so many games when we were 10 feet from the plate, and you could hear every comment being made, and so that element of the game. So it was sort of interesting to me to sort of not, in some ways, MLB, that game should have been great because the top players, top level, but I think we both secretly just wanted to be at a small baseball park. So I think that was one of the things that was sort of surprising to me.
I think that a couple things for me. One is that this project, because we were seeing so many levels, it really reminded me what a difficult game this is.
Yeah.
Because when you just watch the majors, they make it look so easy. And so we're watching high school kids and university students trying to perfect their craft and figure it out, and minor leaguers on their way up, and amateur ball players who probably have hit their plateau, and all these different levels. And it really makes you appreciate the game and how hard it is. And then just in terms of the game itself, because we were so close all the time, and I was able to sit right behind home plate and move around, I probably learned more about pitching in that summer than I did in all of my years of watching baseball, because you can have a batter's eye view and see pitch movement and really concentrate on pitch sequences. And I really learned a lot about what a breaking ball actually looks like from the perspective of the batter, for example, and the reaction time it takes on a good fastball and things like that. So just in terms of the mechanics of the game, for me, it was pitching.
You kind of alluded to this, Heidi, in your answer. And one of the things I admire about the book is the fact that you're both forthcoming about the fact that it was not all sunshine and roses, right? There were times when, you start with that early sort of quintessentially Ontario and upper Midwest weather, in the early part of the season, when the idea of going to a baseball game sounds great, but then you go and it's a couple degrees above freezing. And you also talk about just the grind of it, the length of the project, mirroring the length of a baseball season. I think, Heidi, at one point you talk about how it felt like you were just kind of logging hours at the ballpark to get to this goal.
Mm-hmm.
I admire the fact that you're both forthcoming about that. So maybe talk a little bit about some of the instances where you were less than in love with the whole process.
Dale's smiling.
Just gonna let you start.
Well, when you're talking about the premise of the book and holding our feet to the fire, and I was thinking when you said that immediately about that second game, the Henry Ford game, when I was just soaked and cold, and I thought, I have to do this 48 more times. And it was one of those times, you know, this classic Ontario weather, like, is spring ever going to come? And in fact, April was really difficult for us to get games in just because there was so much rain. So there was that. And there were lots of moments where I think, oh, what am I doing? And I think that, and I should say too, that we were both working full time in addition to do this. So this was all evenings and weekends, or if I took an afternoon off, I'd have to make it up, you know, sometime in the evening or weekend. So that was really the grind. But I think that's also, I think it showed us what a grind the baseball season is. And I remember being at a diner between games in a tournament and seeing all these baseball players, and they were sort of waiting between games and we were waiting between games. And I thought, you know what? I feel what you guys are feeling, right? Like, I'm not actually on the field, but that kind of experience. And so we got to see sort of behind the scenes, which you never really, if you're just an MLB fan, you sort of don't see all that sort of, you know, guys hanging around in a parking lot in their cars waiting for the game to start. And that's part of the game too. So, but we wanted to get to that too. And I think I also have a section too about when I talk about my library and research methods class, that's that sense of data saturation. And I think that was actually because we were researchers on this, right? So I think that you have to get to that point where you see enough that you feel like, okay, I've hit my limit. Like, okay, I get it. And I think that was a really important turning point. I think if we'd done 20 games, it would have been kind of a nice little collage of games, but I kind of liked the 50 games, and that we hit that point, and then both of us hit it at a different point. But then to have to bounce back from that too, which I also think is like a baseball season too.
Yeah, and that kind of point where Heidi mentions data saturation, that kind of hits in the dog days of August. And we had this long stretch where we're just, when the men's elimination tournament was on, we're going to all those games, and then the Summer Collegiate League, Wooden Bat League playoffs, and it's just the stretch of games where we're not doing anything but going to baseball, and we're, you know, having to grab food where we can, and we're not eating well. And, you know, it really did feel like what it must be for these, especially minor league or college players, to go through these road trips. And I think it was the first time I ever had any real appreciation for how long a baseball season is for the players and coaches and everybody involved.
Yeah, I think a lot of us consume baseball at the level of almost like episodic television, right? Like you, like, oh, you know, the Blue Jays are on again. You turn it on and you enjoy it, or you don't, you know, or you turn it off halfway through. But it's hard to remember unless you're doing something the way that you guys engaged, for example, and actually being there over and over, day in, day out. Yeah. There are, though, a lot of places in North America even where this project wouldn't have been possible if you draw on that arbitrary 100-mile circle. What is it about the area that you're in, the sort of upper Midwest and southwestern Ontario, you think that makes it such a hotbed for baseball?
Well, you know, of course, half of our games were in Canada and half were in the US, and that was actually a fluke. But I'm quite happy it ended up that way. So of course we have Michigan and Ohio that have always been big baseball places, and you have the Tigers and the Cleveland baseball team and all of this. But Windsor's always been a big place for baseball. A lot of baseball gets played around here between Windsor and London and Sarnia. It's always been kind of the area for baseball in Ontario. It's always been so popular, and I think part of that is the Tigers being here, that people have been attuned to baseball for a long time. You know, of course, the other place that would have been really possible to do this is in the Lower Mainland in BC,
right?
And that's the other place in Canada that I really think about for being a baseball hotbed. But you're right. I mean, we're both from Edmonton.
Yeah,
it would have been a difficult project to do in Edmonton. So we're lucky, and it's certainly a product of where we live that we're able to do it.
Yeah, I think about, you know, we with my family, we will take summer trips, and I wouldn't say that the proximity to different baseball parks is the main purpose for all concerned, but it certainly plays a factor in what we plan to do. But we found ourselves in places, you know, you can go you can be in Maine, for example, and be a long way from a minor league baseball game, you know?
Yep.
But yeah, you're definitely in a sweet spot, a kind of pocket for it. And I think historically too, right? As I think about it, how long they've been playing baseball in that part of Ontario, or even a little bit further away, sort of toward London and places like that.
Yep.
Baseball has been
Yep.
popular there for.
And
well,
that connects with my my All Stars project too, where we found mentions of I mean, I've really mostly been researching Black baseball in Ontario, but those go back to 1890 and before. And interestingly, the Detroit River was sort of just a river, just something that you would cross. It's not I mean, it's always been a border, but well, not always, but but in the early 20s and 30s, or we just have tons and tons of records of teams coming and playing from Detroit and back and forth and back and forth. So that was sort of a nice, I found that out after we'd done the book, just how much traffic there was between Windsor and Detroit, and then other areas too. So yeah, there's a really rich tradition there, which would be worth exploring in more detail. But yeah, there's a lovely hotbed of baseball in this area for sure.
I want to talk a little bit about the voices, the roles that you inhabit. Dale, for a lot of the book, you kind of take on a sort of a play-by-play role, and Heidi, you're providing almost sort of the color analyst's view of things. And in several passages in the book, Heidi, you're sort of chiding yourself for not seeing the game the way that Dale does, but instead you're noticing the Mays pants or Granderson and the bug. For both of you, though, you give us so much of what's lost in the box score, which I think is what really makes the book strong. Was there any discussion ahead of time about your respective approaches, about how the accounts would be sort of fit together? Or is that just kind of something that, knowing each other as well as you do, you knew that these complementary views of baseball would mesh into a whole?
We actually had no idea how it would turn out. Because it was such a short turnaround between the idea and the actual hatching of it. It was sort of a lucky way. And it's funny that you mentioned the play-by-play and the color, because it wasn't until we had that, and you were in it too, that Globe and Mail piece where the writer said, "Oh, Dale's the color and Heidi's or the play-by-play," and we both went, "Oh," like it never dawned on us until we read that. So that's kind of embarrassing for people who like to call themselves self-reflective writers, but but we had no idea how these things would work, and we wrote these. We each took notes, copious notes, very different notes, and then we went separately and wrote them. And it wasn't until we each had our whole full all games written up in rough drafts that we started to shuffle them together, and we had no idea how it would turn out, and we were kind of happy how that did.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Dale.
Oh no, I was going to say it. I hadn't read anything from Heidi until we did sit down. We sent each other tiny snippets as we were writing, but we've been watching baseball long enough that we had a pretty good idea there wasn't going to be a lot of overlap between what we were noticing and writing. But it was a really gratifying experience to put it together and to go back and forth between the voices and see how they did mesh on the page.
I'm just thinking now, you must have had so many notes. You must have had just like stacks and stacks.
Yeah, are we both reaching for our books?
Yeah.
I mean, here's mine.
Yeah. Well, what an act of synthesis then to get that into this book.
Yeah. Mine still, if I open it, still smells like sunscreen. Yeah. It really smells like sunscreen.
That's only, how many volumes did you have? I used 3 notebooks. How many? You used at least that many.
No, I just used 1, but I write a lot smaller than you do.
Oh,
and scorecards too? Were you keeping like separate actual scorecards too?
No, I couldn't think and keep a scorecard, but Dale was basically doing longhand scorecard.
Yeah, mine was kind of like a scorecard on steroids. I was taking as many notes as I could about what was happening on the field, so that I could distill whatever I needed to out of a game.
At one point, Dale, you write about the difference between paying attention to the score of a game and paying attention to the game. And I wonder if you think that some of that skill of closely reading a game or of actively noticing a game is being lost or flattened out the way that most people watch baseball now, certainly at the major league level. Nothing ever happens, I think, is what one of your coworkers says to you, Heidi. And I think that's a common perception, right? Is there any hope that we might, as sort of evangelists for the game, convince people that there is a lot going on, even when they don't see something on the surface going on? And in fact, was that, I wonder, one of the aims of writing the book?
It was definitely one of the aims of writing the book. One of the problems now is that it's sometimes hard for me to watch a major league game because it's either a strikeout or it's a home run, and it's dull. It's dull when there's nothing happening on the base paths. And over the course of that summer, we got so used to watching these games where, the bunt is still a play you have to be able to make, that you use the hit and run, that you see squeezes, you see things that just don't happen that often. So it does become kind of a hard sell sometimes, the way Major League Baseball is played right now. Although I still think there's lots of interesting things, but it is hard to convey that when it is the way it is right now.
Yeah, and I quote my mom about my family are the people who believe that in Alberta the mountains get in the way of the view. So my mom was always really upset when people say, "Oh, this Saskatchewan is so boring. It's so there's nothing there." And my mom's like, "Everything is there. You just have to learn how to look for it. You have to see, the textures and the colors and the shadow and all these things." And I think baseball can use that kind of approach too. And so it's like, "Oh, nothing happens." Like, well, a million things are happening. Like, look at this and look at that. But you need to know what to look for. And I think that's one of the tricky things if you were just to go from watching say a Tigers game, which is sort of, nonstop stimuli, right? Whether it's on the field or off the field with the scoreboards and the whatever, to another game where there's like 3 people in the stands or something. And if you're relying on baseball being that constant external stimulus, often manufactured, it is a tough thing to learn how to see a baseball game. In the same way, it's hard to like see what makes a poem fantastic, right? If you just read the words, but if you know what to look for, then it becomes more interesting. And I think reading a poem or reading a baseball game, I think they're really similar acts. They require some understanding of what people are trying to do and what's been done before and what's possible.
I like that. That's good. That's interesting. The book, at least in the copy I have, I have the advanced copy, but it's dedicated to both of your fathers. Is that still the case with I imagine with the Dale, of the statues of Tigers greats at Comerica, you write it's 1,800 miles to Dad's grave and only 5 to Charlie Gehringer's statue. Did you learn anything along the way about baseball's ability to strengthen relationships, both with the people we still have and those that we've lost?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the things I read about in the book is it felt like Dad was along that whole way, but it also felt like I had along these friends that I don't live in the same city, but we used to watch baseball together. And it's still one of our points of connection. And I think about a lot of the friends I have in Windsor, and often they're people that, we can go to a Tigers game or talk about the Tigers, or, we have baseball in common. And that's not true for all my friends, but certainly this made me think about relationships in that way, but it also made me observe relationships. I think both of us, between parents and children, siblings, husbands and wives, all of those things, the players and the people who were there to support them, or the people going to watch a game. I think about some of the families going to watch minor league games. So yeah, it was one of the things that I really thought about a lot during this project was how baseball and relationships fit together.
Heidi, anything occur to you along those lines during the whole project?
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, my mom was getting sick during this project, and I probably didn't realize how that I would lose her within the year. So I did spend a lot of time. When I look back at the book, I realized, oh, there's a lot of looking at parents and relationships, and all those just lovely moments of whether they're dads or moms cheering for their kid on the field, or if it's, you know, one of my favorite, well, a couple favorite moments, but I love the dad in Detroit with his little girl. Like, I wrote that and my computer crashed and I lost it, so I had to rewrite it. So when I rewrote it twice, like both times, I love that relationship so much. And I also like, there's a dad and the hot dog boy, or I don't know if he's his dad or anything, but just that level of, you know, there's something just absolutely timeless and magical. And for those two, you know, child and adult, no one else existed. And I love that, you know, and here's a parent or a guardian or whatever that other guy was, sharing something that was hugely important with him, with a younger person. And I love that. And I think maybe why parents and kids keep popping up in this book too, which is something that I love about your book too. You're always talking about, you know, you've got this limited time where you can influence your children. And so, you know, those moments are sort of fleeting, but, you know, life altering.
Yeah, and they don't seem that way to the younger, right? When to the kids, it doesn't seem that way. It seems like it'll always be there and always be available. But you know, I had the kids. There's a park just down the street here. I had them out yesterday, and we all hit right-handed, and we were hitting the ball and taking our turns. And my daughter decided, I don't know why, but she decided, she's 14. She decided to turn around and hit from the left side, and I tossed her a ball, and she first swing, you know, demolished it. and it made me think so many things. I mean, it made me think, first of all, my God, to be young again, but yeah, all these firsts, right? That don't, as a kid, they just kind of roll off, but as you age, they kind of get imbued with a little bit more weight, or I don't know. Melancholy sometimes, but I don't want to jump too far from this book because there's a lot to talk about, but I am interested, Heidi, in the project that you're working on. And I think we're also working on, while you were writing this, or while you were attending the games, which is about the 1934 Chatham Colored All-Stars. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, I could talk for days about that. This project kind of fell into my lap, and it's totally changed my life. It's one of these great things. People think it's weird that I've given my background that I'm writing so many books about baseball, and maybe it is, but it's about, I think one of the things that really intrigues me about the All-Stars is it's this brilliant, fascinating story that exists outside of Chatham. It's hardly known, but inside Chatham, it's a very well-known story. And over time, I've got to know the children of some of these players. So some of them are still alive, and so they've been talking to us and adopting us and bringing them into their lives and families, and it's really hard for me to watch baseball and not think about them. This is a story of this is obviously before Jackie Robinson's time, but there are players who probably could have gone all the way. In 1934, the team the All-Stars beat, the pitcher was Phil Marshallton, so he, you know, obviously went on, but none of the All-Stars could. And so, you know, it's a story about race and sport. It's about hope. It's about family. It's about everything. So I'm really, really excited to share that again with people and convey some of the history.
I'm looking forward to reading that. That sounds very interesting.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I just sent the first draft off to Dan at Biblioasis. So yeah.
So just under a year from now, is that
that's what we're hoping. Yeah. So
2020 was difficult. You know, as a baseball fan, to wait for the beginning of the baseball season. How hard was it for you, especially after, maybe, I don't know, I guess in one respect, perhaps you kind of were able to build up your stores of baseball memories and then disperse them, throughout that largely barren summer, or maybe you felt it the way a lot of us did. So I'm curious about what that was like last year for you, and what your relationship is like to baseball now.
I think one of the things this project did is I still watch the Tigers, but it pushed me a bit away from cheering for one team. So now, and this was true in 2020 as well, and I think it helped. And I think I have a better relationship with baseball because of it. Now, I don't always know when the Tigers are playing. If I want to watch baseball, I'll sit down and I'll turn on the Major League Baseball package and just start watching whatever game seems like it'll be interesting. So I've seen just about every team at some point, at least for a couple innings this summer. So I find it very satisfying to continue watching without as much rooting interest, to just be watching the game for its own sake. And that's been fun, especially to see some of the teams that I wouldn't have paid much attention to in the past, like the Padres or the Mets or things like that. It's been fun.
Heidi, what about
it's funny because people kept saying, oh, will you go to more baseball when this is done after the next summer? And 2019, I think you might have gone to a game, Dale. I remember I went to half a game because I had to meet someone. It was just easier to meet it. But neither of us could really watch baseball in 2019 just because we were writing this book, and it was just we sort of had to keep that compartmentalized. And we're like, okay, well, 2020, that's going to be the year that we really see like what our relationship to baseball is. And then, nothing. But we did toward, when was that, like September, I think we started watching playoffs, and I think we watched every inning of the World Series. And again, at the end of that World Series, I remember thinking, as I had before when we were watching a lot of Tigers games, like, how are we going to make it through the winter without baseball? And so that was kind of a nice moment. But I think before, I probably would have watched the World Series and thought, oh, well, I don't really care about any of these teams. But I think this project really made me watch the sport and the game as opposed to a competition between two teams. And so it was kind of a lovely reintegration of that. And as Dale said, now we're just sort of watching whomever and just seeing lots of different players, and that's exciting and interesting too. So it's really, I don't know, it's funny because this book and the pandemic have really jarred how not everybody has written this book, but like for us, it's really jarred, how we watch baseball. And I think it is for a lot of other people too.
I was thinking the other day about, this is probably the longest stretch since at some point in my childhood between attending baseball games for me personally, and I can't wait to get back. But I also can't, just given the way things are with the borders still closed and the Jays aren't coming home, and my kids' baseball team can't even practice yet. So I don't know when the next time I'll actually be in front of a live baseball game is. And you guys you're in Ontario too, so you're probably in the same boat.
Yeah.
I can't wait until I can finally, even if it's senior men's league down at the East City Bowl sort of thing.
Yeah. I ride my bike past a couple ball diamonds on my little route, and they're so sad but so beautiful because they're sort of these sort of archaic sites that you start to feel nostalgic about. Oh, in the olden days I used to play baseball here, that kind of thing.
I've been trying to see them as the promise of what will soon return, and we had tickets the summer of 2020 to we had a big road trip planned across the country, across the continent, and we had tickets for a game in Minneapolis and tickets for a game in Seattle, and I actually I'm one of those people who insist that they send me the ticket. So I have the tickets, but the tickets to games that never happened, and
wow.
But I keep them. They're right over there. So one day we'll get back.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, reading your book was a wonderful way to in a sense go to 50 baseball games. So I appreciated that about it for sure. Because the things that you notice, I think, are things that I would like to notice when I'm at games. So really a wonderful book. the last question I have for you, and feel free to add anything that you think people may want to know, but do you have any inkling as to when the Tigers might be good again?
They're always good.
They're in terms of they're actually showing signs now. The pitching's coming around. They can't score runs, but nobody seems to be able to score runs this year.
Yeah.
But they've got a couple big bats in the low minors in single A West Michigan and in double A Erie.
Yep.
I think they might even be able to snag a wild card by next year. We'll have to see. They got to be able to spend a little bit of money in free agency. That's since Mike Ilitch died, that's been a little bit of an issue, I think.
And are you prepared, Heidi, to give your heart to another Curtis Granderson-like player should he come along?
I've tried.
Share your love of Curtis Granderson. He's just so likable.
Yeah, I'm looking. I think my bobblehead Curtis is downstairs. Yeah, no, I think there's this whole thing in a Jane Austen novel, but whether you can survive, can you love more than one person in your life? And I'm sort of at that point, like, no, you can only have one Curtis in your life.
But
the funny thing is, sorry.
You sort of tried, and
I kept trying.
Austin Jackson, and then he got traded in the middle of a game. I mean, and I think we were at that game, and Heidi turned to me and said, "Okay, I don't even know if I can watch baseball anymore."
Well, we didn't know he'd been traded. He just came out, and then we get home, and yeah, I don't know. I don't think I can. I think maybe you only need one gateway player, right? Like.
As I was thinking, somebody asked me recently, talking about my book, if since Ichiro had retired, was there somebody else and who kind of filled the role? And when you love a player who's so singular, you can love other players, but it's not the same, right? I love watching Vladimir Guerrero Jr. hit. He's exciting every time he steps on the diamond, but it's not the same. It doesn't fill the same hole. The hole's a different shape,
Yeah. That's a great way. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all I have. I mean, I'd love to talk about all of the different ballparks you went to. I've been to a number of the ones that you mentioned, some of the minor league ones. But maybe that's a conversation best had over a beer sometime, face to face.
Yeah, be good.
Well, here's a question for you.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to talk for another podcast together again, right? But so of all the parks that we went to, where would you go? Or if you could go to any of those games?
I know the experience that you had at the game in London was not entirely positive, but I really want to get to Labatt Park in London. I've never been.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to kind of see that. And some of the really small parks that you describe, especially around Windsor. Yeah, I was wondering at one point, how many ballparks are there in Windsor? How many diamonds are there? Because it seems like there are dozens upon dozens within a very short drive from your front door. But
there are 4 really good diamonds that they use. They often have the men's senior elimination tournament here. So there are 4 diamonds that they use for it that are all really solid quality parks. And then there's some, small communities have other ones too. But
and you went to see a game, and I'm forgetting. I made note of it because the family and I, we've been to a game, Whitecaps, the West Michigan Whitecaps home game, but you saw them on the road where? It was that Lansing, the Lugnuts?
No, that was in just outside Cleveland, the Lake County Captains.
Okay.
It's just to the east of Cleveland, like 10 miles east of downtown.
Right.
So yeah.
I think I'm like you guys though. There really aren't many games in just about any ballpark that I would turn down. It's just, I just love it, And there's some kind of like a magnetic pull. There's like a I don't know, a magic sink involved. When I go near a diamond, I can kind of feel its gravity. I want to, it doesn't have to be a fancy diamond.
I'd really like to go see a game, a pit spitters game, like you talked about in your book.
It's like one or two of the ones you guys described in that, and it seems to be common in the wood bat leagues. It's got the all turf field and infield. But it's a neat park, and it was a great experience. It was a fun.
Fun.
a real fun kind of laid back minor league atmosphere to it. Yeah. So
Yeah. But yeah, I had been to Labatt Park because there was you might be interested in this, the Canadian Baseball History
Mhm.
Conference. And so I was there and they offered us a tour of the historic Labatt Park. So I got into, you know, the dugouts and the dressing rooms and all that kind of locker rooms and stuff. I'm like, wow, did that ever smell? But but it was really cool to see that historic building. And so I was really excited to go to a game. And so we probably just picked the wrong game to go to.
Well, I'm sure we did. I mean, I was at a game, London Tigers. It used to be the Detroit AA team, a game there in the late 80s. And it was a great place to see a ball game. So yeah, it was just hot and like
Crowded. And
it's just that night. So
we should, I feel like, I think most of the people tuning into this are probably going to be Americans. So we should maybe let them know that what we're talking about is Labatt Park in London, Ontario, which is the oldest continuously used ball field in the world, right?
yeah, I put a little star
Yeah.
and a footnote. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's some technicality about,
It's not that the ballpark itself, that the bleachers were built in 1860 or whatever. It's that the field itself has been used continuously for baseball since then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So no, that was good.
Yeah, this has been great. So unless you got anything you want to add, I think wrap it up and I'll do the outros and we'll.
Sure. Well, thank you. That was
great.
that was really
It's been
fun.
a pleasure.
Listen, thank you guys. That was great. I really enjoyed it. It's good to connect. I think we were talking before we went on live here that given that we've both released baseball books with, you know, Canadian literary presses, it seemed inevitable that in a normal year we would be, you know, doing panels and things together. So this is the next best thing. It's not quite as good, but I've enjoyed doing it. So I'll wrap it up and just say that the book, once again, is called 100 Miles of Baseball, 50 Games, 100 Days. Dale and Heidi L.M. Jacobs have been with me. The book is available from Biblioasis at your local indie, from bookshop.org or wherever you may happen to get your books. This has been another installment of the Pandemic Baseball Book Club. Thank you for tuning in. And until next time, take care.